So we're going to talk today about the second of the Indriya, or the faculties, the five, what are called the faculties. Um, and today we're on number two, which is energy or vigilance applied to the path, applied to meditation practice. This is a compelling theme. Because there are so many layers to this. There is discipline in meditation. There is also complete relinquishing of meditation itself. There is regathering your mind, collecting it back once it scatters. And then there is effortlessly abiding with the mind in whatever state it's in. So how on earth do we make sense of energy, vigilance, sometimes what's called perseverance? The Sanskrit and Pali term is virya. So we're going to talk about that a bit, and also have a chance to practice it real time. And we'll do some guided practice. First, I'm going to read to you. A slight departure from the Buddhist texts, from the Tao Te Ching. So, what is Wu Wei, and what is sort of the essence of this particular passage? It's number 48 in the Tao Te Ching. So we'll be looking at that later, and it's I think, a really sort of wise suggestion that Zhuan gave me to sort of counterbalance this notion of effort that we find in the Eightfold Path and in many different contexts in Buddhism. So here is what Lao Tzu says here in the Tao Te Ching. In the pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired. In the pursuit of Tao, every day something is relinquished. Less and less is done until a fullness of non-action is achieved. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. The world is thus ruled by letting things be and take their course. It cannot be ruled by interfering with all that is. So this translation is by Jia Feng and Jane English, and I kind of fancy myself a scholar once in a while. Since I do teach at Harvard, I think it's probably good to at least be accountable for other translations of something. And this is another version of the same passage, and I don't know about you, but often I'll get the spirit of something when I look at multiple translations, and then whatever that through line is between them usually is the path to follow. So this version by Stephen Mitchell. In the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped. Less and less do you need to force things until finally you arrive at non-action. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. True mastery can be gained by letting things go their own way. And nothing is gained by interfering. So similar with some different nuances there. And I can already hear the activists on the call going, hang on a minute. And we can certainly go there later on in our discussion. What is not being said is don't do anything about easing suffering, because here we have Buddhism come in and say responsiveness, skillful means are important when we encounter suffering. And so it's an interesting juxtaposition of these different notions and thoughts. The key is context. So I'm wondering how many of you have tried to open a tight jar with your feet? All right. How many of you have tried to open a tight jar with your teeth? What on earth is he talking about? There's a lot of. I'm glad that a lot of people are shaking their heads. That's good. I think that that speaks to the mental health of our group. Um, how would that be possible? Why would we want to do this? Well, think about a jar that is hard to open. And what are your feet doing as you're sitting there trying to crank the lid off and it's not moving? Are they gripping the floor? No. What are your teeth doing as you're trying to open this jar? Are they relaxed, and or is your entire face tense and contorted? Is your entire body trying to open the jar? Or is it just your hands and all that energy that is going out into all those other parts of the body, the feet, the back, the neck, the teeth, the jaw, all trying to open it? Try this next time this happens to you, is relax everything in your body except your hands. Take all that energy that would otherwise go into your feet, your teeth, your neck, and just direct it right into your hands, and thing will probably come off. Does that make sense? Now it's clear why he asked that. Hopefully. Um, I think it's a good metaphor for this second of the five Indriyas, or five faculties, that we began last week. So if you couldn't join us last week, I'm happy just to do a quick overview of what these are. Um, these faculties in meditation, and also sort of on whatever path we may be, or also can be applied to just living life in general. These are seen to be, I mean, what I call them are more capacities. I think faculties are fine, but as I mentioned last week, I think of these more as capacities. We get better at cultivating things like faith, energy, mindfulness, stillness, or a concentrated mind, and wisdom. And those are the five indriyas, or the five faculties that also involve our senses. And as we get better at cultivating these five qualities, they actually evolve into what are called the five powers, or balas. Bala means strength or power. Indriya really means faculty, or as I like to think of it, more as capacities. So there seem to be two different lists, but they are the same qualities that go from more sort of cultivation, sensory-based cultivation, to actual abilities, to capacities. And so last week we did faith. What is faith in Buddhism? I was taking the train from New York yesterday back to Boston, and I edited the video, so I'll be posting that in the next 24 hours. So you're welcome to go back and watch that on the YouTube channel. We talked about Shraddha, or this notion of faith in Buddhism. Confidence, trust, those kinds of things. And today we're looking at virya, this word that sometimes is translated into energy or vigilance. You find this concept of virya in many lists in Buddhism, in Buddhist psychology, and in meditation practice. It's one of the, basically it's sort of the principle of right effort in the Eightfold Path. You find it in the seven factors of awakening, the sense of vigilance or energy or effort. You find it in the Abhidharma, or the classic text in the Tripitaka, and the sort of the three baskets of Buddhism, where this very dry, kind of concentrated list of consciousness states and qualities. And it's very prominent in there as sort of an antidote to laxity, to avoidance, to laziness, those kinds of things. So it pops up everywhere. It's an important concept. And yet, what is it that we think of when we think of vigilance or energy? Yeah. What does it tell us about Wu Wei? This reading from the Tao Te Ching we did earlier, actionless action. What is the quality of energy that is the most wholesome and the most beneficial here. One of my teachers, Leslie, who I reference almost every time we gather, she had this wonderful term, impeccability. And by impeccability, she meant a really sweet, perfect balance of energy. Your energy is so balanced. On one hand, it is being ultimately conserved. It's not being squandered or thrown around. And yet, it's skillfully applied in just the right measure. And so, just as we did in our meditation, this balancing between effort and effortlessness through this eagle image, maybe resonate more with the jar opening thing. Now, yeah, sometimes we have to apply force. If we're opening a stuck jar, sometimes I'll bang it on the counter and that releases the pressure and so on. So this quality of vigilance is, and how it relates to Wu Wei is not just doing nothing. Yeah. It is actually trying to facilitate a wholesome outcome, but conserving kind of the output of energy. Imagine how much energy our thoughts consume, especially negative thoughts. If we're trying to cope with a history of trauma, if we're trying to kind of live in such a way that we're just trying to be okay to make it through the day, there is an enormous amount of energy that goes into preserving how we move through our lives. And part of these teachings, I think here, this second Indriya, this faculty of energy or of vigilance, it's not there to sort of force us to do even more than we're capable of doing. Quite the contrary. We're being invited into discovering a really wholesome balance. And that's what my teacher Leslie meant by impeccability. That you don't have to be doing probably a lot of the things you're doing if you walk into a market and maybe there's a problem at the cashier, or you're there to get your coffee and then something's happening across the room. How many of us actually project ourselves into that situation? You know? Oh, is there something I need to do here? Maybe there is. Maybe someone's being sort of violated with words. And maybe we choose to say something. We're not being told not getting involved. And I know that the Wu Wei passage we read says not interfering, allows things to be as they are and all of that. It's not an injunction against acting skillfully when we encounter suffering. This is what Buddhism would say anyway. But rather it's considering how much of my projecting now is just being triggered and being thrown off into the world around me. And that takes enormous energy. No wonder we're exhausted at the end of the day when we get home and we've been around people. We've been in a highly energized, polarized society, bombarded with media, with social media. And me too, I'm the same way. I was at my mother's for almost a week, and she is a news junkie, and the news is constantly going, including all the commercials. And so, it takes a lot of energy to kind of keep that out of my space and do my Zoom meetings, in the other room and so on. Nothing wrong with those things, but we have to sort of start seeing how much of our energy is just being siphoned off in all of these directions. So how do we find balance? And that is really kind of the question of this particular faculty. So I like to think of it as flow, not to sort of oversimplify the teachings. But if you come out of a meditation once in a while and you feel like, wow, you know what, every move I make is just sort of easeful. It's flow. It's not forced. I'm not needing to, over apply energy or do anything, but things feel natural and they feel like I'm in some kind of flow. The same is true. Tajay and I actually just played tennis last week. And I was thinking about this as we were on the court together, how a swing, a tennis swing, has more power in it when you have less effort. You allow your wrist to be a little bit more supple. Your arm isn't stiff and straight, but there is this sort of easeful flow. And then when you make that swing, you actually have more energy going into the subtler parts of your swing. Yeah. Now I didn't tell Tajay this. He didn't know all this was happening. But anyway, he's fun to play tennis with. So the easefulness component is important. Um, Non-interfering. So that when I kind of revisited that piece of the Tao Te Ching, I went, yeah, but there's so much that needs fixing out there. There's so much going on. The Supreme Court is doing this, that, and the other. There's so much that needs to happen. We need to stay vigilant and sort of, I don't know what your political domains are. We're not going to go there. And what we're really trying to uncover here is the middle way, not sort of being in a polarity here. But there are qualities where we need to consider appropriate measures for the conditions. And so this is what sometimes in Buddhism is called expedient means or skillful means, and yet not overdoing it, not sort of wasting our energy in areas that aren't going to lead to an outcome of some kind. A lot of this comes back to our expectations, perhaps. What if we were able to move through the course of a day free from clinging to outcomes, free from needing things to be according to our projections and our expectations and our agendas, but rather allowing the naturalness of all things to be as they are, whatever tendencies are there. This is the spirit of Wu Wei, after all. It's recognizing that all things exist according to their own tendencies. And for us to think, well, I'm going to change those tendencies. I'm going to sort of rearrange the causes so that this person, there's futility there in many cases. And so part of this principle of Wu Wei is allowing things to be in accord with their own nature. That is the natural way. How do we do this? Well, we can simply watch the natural world. This is how things are in the natural world. They evolve not just according to their own nature, but in some kind of interdependence. You take away one piece, a flower dies. If it doesn't have the soil, the water, and all of these things. And so there is a naturalness to that. For us, that can be hard. And the Buddha knew this. This is why, part of this notion of vigilance, it matters that we have energy, that we have clarity and vitality to put into our practice, but in a way where equanimity is also part of the equation, one of those ingredients that grows a really auspicious flower. So we want to be skillful, we want to be easeful, and we want clarity. These are qualities that we get better at through shamatha, through mindfulness practice, right? Having a sense of capacity, having a sense of ease, just relax, yeah? And a mind that is clear, that is full of acuity, that is vivid, an awareness that is open and clear. And out of that space comes creativity, comes a proper response, and a response that perhaps is imbued with more insight than just being that gallant young knight that jumps up on his horse and goes galloping off in all directions. Has anybody heard this metaphor? I don't know. That describes me sometimes, until I realize, okay, this isn't helping. So how are we in the world? This is part of the teaching. We want to have energy and vitality. We also need to conserve what we're putting out. And meditation can help us learn that. It can help us learn, how am I relating really to the conditions within me? And that's a way to teach me how then I'm relating to the conditions around me when I then get off the cushion and go into the world, if you will. So how do I respond wakefully and mindfully? And if I can't, why not? Why not? And here we can look at the five hindrances in the mindfulness teachings. Yeah, we covered those this morning with Tajay in the sutra study. So I was happy, Tajay, this morning when you began to talk about those five hindrances. But what are they? The five hindrances. These are things that pop up naturally in our meditation. There's the attachment, the clinging, what sometimes called sensual pleasures. It's really about just the clinging, the desire realm, grasping. And then the second one is aversion or negativity, ill will, sometimes it's called, but it's really sort of feeling a sense of aversion to something. Even if it's in our body, my neck is hurting, my posture is this or that, I'm antsy, I'm feeling anxious while I'm sitting here. Chris is going on and on way too long, and I'm getting really impatient. These are all part of that second hindrance of aversion. And then we come to this restless, agitated mind, what's called the monkey mind, yeah? This monkey mind that's just going all over the place, crazy, and it's jumping and it's screaming out. And then the fourth is sloth, torpor, this quality of laxity. I frankly don't know when we ever use these terms, sloth and torpor, unless we're talking about Buddhism. I've never heard anybody use these in other contexts, but so be it. This is how they're defined. Other also defined as the elephant in a rut, as I mentioned this morning. Yeah, the sloth, heavy tamasic quality. Sometimes the monkey is riding the elephant. Isn't that a joyful experience? Now, what do you do with that? Anyway, and then the final of the five hindrances is doubt, confusion, doubt, dullness, just not sort of feeling any kind of hope or positivity in the teachings or in our capacity to practice. Anyway, those are things that actually can really be a manifestation of this unbridled mind, this energy that is just sort of going off in all directions until the mind settles on its own. And these hindrances resolve themselves usually on their own too. You don't have to try to struggle with them. Usually, when there is an increase in one of the hindrances, on the other side is a deepening of calm. And so that's why, as we practiced, I said, don't take the bait. Yeah, if things are coming up, let them be. The mind will settle. And so part of the first Indriya last week, we talked about faith in the nature of your own sort of clear, spacious mind. After all, if it were not there, you'd never get there in meditation. So have faith in that too is there. So I'm almost done here. I also wanted to sort of highlight, during our practice, we did this non-meditation, the non-doing. So part of it was, even stopping your meditation and just abiding in simplicity. So even meditation can be a source of controlling things. It can even be that which we're trying to do, quote unquote, as opposed to allowing things to be as they are, and rather drop more into a recognition of that fundamental nature of mindful awareness. Even if you don't feel it, just know it's there. And be patient. So anyway, my question for you in the time we have left, I'm curious how you might answer this question. So where is the effort in your life and in your practice? And where is your energy going? And I don't mean what are you doing, yeah? Or you're putting energy into cooking meals, and not so much the what, but sort of what are the dimensions of your life, or kind of the states of mind where all your energy is going. What does that look like for you? I've always found it helpful to inquire, what is it that belongs to me? What energy is it that belongs to me, and what energy does not? That I'm kind of carrying and holding and pulling in, yeah? And being able to sort that out can be helpful. Because we're not these sort of closed systems of thoughts that are just trapped within the head. Yeah, consciousness is, at least according to kind of the way that I see things, and also to much of this notion of collective consciousness. Um, we're impacted by the energy of other people's thoughts, and when we're in a densely populated place, man, there's a lot coming at us, and we don't even know it. And that's sometimes why I think when I go out hiking in central Massachusetts and I'm in the trail and there's no people around, I mean, it's like, wow, the mind really feels open and free out here. I can breathe, my mind can breathe, if you will, because it isn't being cluttered. And, if you're sensitive to those things, I think you start seeing, uh, I think, more accurately, what is it that I'm carrying? And maybe I need to just sort of separate out all that crap that doesn't belong to me. Especially if you're in a helping profession, if you're a therapist or a chaplain, or you're just a super empathetic person. You can walk around and pull it in. Yeah. So sorting that out matters. The thing we didn't talk about also is momentum, and how much the momentum of our lives, the busyness, the involvement, the attending to the work, the study, all of that actually builds up an energetic momentum in our space, so that settling down, either at the end of the day or whenever, it becomes effortful, because there's a part of us that doesn't want to settle down. We're on the treadmill, the momentum is going, oh, I just need to finish this. I know what that's like in the middle of a semester at Harvard. It's just, things keep rolling, and if I don't roll with them, you know, lose control. And really we're talking I think we're talking in part anyway about control. And so what happens if I just stop and let it all go? Well, I may not feel like starting again, or I may get really tired and realize, and so it's just kind of lose the center a bit.
I think
It can feel like there's a lot at stake, but until we realize it's okay to do this. It's okay to practice and let go and be renewed, and then enter back in sort of with fresh eyes. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Nina, this whole notion of vigilance being, or diligence, because that is also a part of the teaching. It's interesting that my housemate Darren, who's an athlete, he's a tennis professional. He and I are very, very different. But he's very good at discipline. Like he'll go for like months at a time, and he'll purposely avoid certain foods or certain things, and he pushes through it. Like, he's really good. I think being an athlete helps you learn how to discipline in that way, that you control this enough to where you can do it. And I'm the total opposite. Like, that doesn't work for me, but what does work for me is devotion. The aspect of discipline that sort of the root word disciple, or being devoted to, is that aspect of discipline that works for me. I have to really sort of put my heart into it and be devoted to it, and then I'm able to be vigilant with something. And so part of it is knowing our own nature, because for some people, force yourself to sit and practice every day, and you're always glad you do. You get up and you do it again the next day. If my heart's not in it, it's not going to happen. And I know myself that way. So how we see what works for us, perseverance is another definition for virya. And hanging in there, the Buddha himself taught one of the ways to abandon sorrow is endure. Sometimes you just have to endure something that's difficult. You can't always turn it from mud into a lotus. Sometimes you have to get through it, and then you can do kind of the work of metabolizing your experience. The part of the Dhammapada, I believe, the 6 ways of abandoning sorrow. Anyway, this is a multi-layered thing, and so this is why I think the question of where is your energy going, where is the effort for you, helps to kind of inquire a little bit, do a little inquiry into what is it that will help me remain steady on the path. Because that's really what we're talking about here. Yeah.